We've heard for years that Social Security is on the path to insolvency, and the concern for those that aren't receiving it yet is that they may never receive it. So what does retirement look like if Social Security were to vanish overnight? And alternatively, what would it look like if drastic cuts had to be made to keep it running? I've been getting questions like this a lot lately, and in this video, I want to explore that topic as a case study. So we're going to look at a retired couple and uncover what happens if Social Security benefits are greatly reduced, or what happens if they are gone entirely. Hey everybody, I'm Curtis Crossland of Subtle Crossland Wealth Advisors, and I help folks build more tax-efficient retirements. So let's get into it. Now, a couple quick points before we get into the example. As I've stated in past videos, any probability of success is going to depend on a number of different components and a number of personal factors. I can't possibly cover every situation, but to me it still highlights the importance for everybody to run their own analysis. And in regards to the spending in this example, we're going to refer back to the most recent report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And if you look at that average spending for that target age group 65 plus, it's $57,818 per year, or just over $4,800 per month. Now, this data is from 2022, so we're actually going to use $5,000 per month or $60,000 per year, at least for this example. And with that out of the way, let's dive into the case study. So here we get to meet Joe and Jane, our case study crash test dummies. Both are 65 years old. They both stopped working at the beginning of the year. They're both ready to retire and enjoy a hard-earned break. Little do they know it's coming, but we know, and at some point here, we're going to drop the anvil on them. So we can actually go ahead and take a look and see what kind of assets they're working with. They have a pretty respectable net worth at just over $1.5 million. And what makes that up here, we have $60,000 in their current bank balance. We've got $166,000 in their taxable brokerage. The primary home is worth $500,000. And then Joe's got an IRA worth $450,000. And Jane's got an IRA worth $384,000. So when you break down the net worth, $1 million of that is specifically going to be in investments like the IRAs and then the non-retirement brokerage. And then the rest of the net worth is going to be made up from the home value plus what they have cash in the bank. When we come up here and we take a look at what their goals are, it's pretty straightforward and simple. They basically want to have retirement spending of $5,000. That's something that we discussed previously as far as trying to use as close to that Bureau of Labor Statistics average. Bumped up a bit just because that number came originally from 2022. So we said $5,000 a year or $60,000 annually. Now, we're going to have some forces at work here in regards to inflation. There's also going to be other assumptions that will apply as well that will help us analyze their whole situation. And at least for now, I'm going to keep the inclusion of additional healthcare costs and long-term care costs. We can always play around with those when we start taking a look at the actual retirement breakdown. But I've put this in other videos. When you look at something like the longtermcare.gov website, there is a nearly 70% chance that somebody is going to need long-term care at some point in their life, at least right now. And next, we're going to take a look at what income sources they have, and really it's pretty straightforward. They're going to basically have, other than their investments, their savings, everything that makes up their net worth, they're going to have Social Security. There are no other pensions. There is nothing else as far as any rents or royalties or any other ownership in anything that would provide them regular income. So they're basically going to try to make this work and have planned to make this work using Social Security plus their investments and savings and additional net worth if needed. When we actually take a look at Joe's Social Security, just to kind of help us set those assumptions, we're going to see that he's going to wait until age 70 to actually take the Social Security. His goal is to try to maximize the benefit over his lifetime, and he's currently healthy. But when we take a look here, we're actually going to say that his benefit at full retirement age, and remember, full retirement age for him is 67, his benefit at that time is going to be $2,800. So if he actually delays and waits until 70, the benefit amount will increase each year up until he hits 70. Now, this isn't a normal planning scenario. I mean, right now we're basically saying that we're using the Social Security to its full capability. So the benefit amount that he's going to have when he actually hits age 70, it's going to be a little bit higher, but the $2,800 is based on his full retirement at 67. So that's what we have for his situation. And if we come and look at Jane, we're going to have a really similar outlook. She's going to wait till 70 as well. She's also healthy. She wants to try to maximize what her lifetime payout will be. And when we take a look at what her benefit would be at full retirement age, we do see that her benefit is $2,200. So again, at age 67, her benefit would be $2,200 per month. If she delays until 70, that's going to get a little bit of a bump each year until 70. So now, taking a look at a quick recap for what it is that we're doing. They're 65, they are retiring now. Their intent is to retire on a combination of their Social Security as well as their investments, and if need be, any other aspect of their net worth later in life. So we're also going to say that their planning horizon is going to age 90. We can always play around with that number as well if we want to see what happens if one of them lives to say 100. So now we'll come and take a look at the outlook for their retirement. And so here we can see that they actually have a very good looking Monte Carlo outcome, 99% probability of success. We see a pretty solid median line here, just over 2.5 million. So let's take a look at a couple other key metrics and see what it's telling us. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll actually come over here and we'll look at the withdrawal rate on their current plan. So initially, they do have a fairly high withdrawal rate, but this is because they're trying to live off of those investments and savings up until 70 when that Social Security kicks in. And then once Social Security kicks in, we see that their withdrawal rate pretty much falls down almost to zero here. And then once they're 73 plus, we do see the withdrawal rate pick up, but that's really just because the required minimums begin for them. And then at end of life, we do see a couple big withdrawals here, but that's again just to facilitate the assumption that we made on the long-term care. Next, we can come and take a look at how their assets change over time. And at least initially, we do see in those first few years of living off of the portfolio and the savings, balance stays kind of even. Once that Social Security kicks in, well, now we start to see this go up. And this continues to escalate up until they hit roughly age 88, at which point we put in again that long-term care assumption. And then it falls off, but this is basically showing us a scenario where because they have enough regular and stable income through Social Security, their investments are able to stay at work. They're able to stay working against that inflation over time and working really to try to preserve their purchase power. We can also come over here and we can take a look at our confidence interval as well. And this really starts to look a little bit ideal. You notice that the dispersion or the amount of spread between that 5 and 95% confidence level isn't too crazy wide. We don't see on that lower end, we don't see that crash down and hit that life expectancy line down here at any point. And like we saw with the assets growing, we see that median line increase over time as well. And it's really, again, only at the end when we have that long-term care assumption that we start to see anything dip off at all. So again, this is their outlook when they have Social Security as a foundation or cornerstone of their plan. Let's go ahead and break the hypothetical bad news to them and see what happens when we start to have a reduction or a change in Social Security benefits. So when we come back over here and we look again at the income, all we're going to do, at least for this first scenario, is we're going to say, hey, overnight Social Security Administration came out. They have said, yikes, we have to cut everybody's benefit in half starting immediately. Let's see what that's going to do. So at least for Joe, instead of having $2,800 per month as his full retirement benefit at 67 and then getting a little bit of that escalation to 70, we're instead going to say, well, he's got $1,400 for his full retirement benefit now, and that will increase a little bit up till age 70, but obviously we're going to see that cut in half. And then we're going to do the same thing for Jane. So instead of her having $2,200 as her full retirement age benefit, we're going to say it's $1,100. And let's see if you can guess what's going to happen. I think it's fairly obvious, but let's take a look. So when we head back to the retirement analysis here, well, what are we seeing? Now all of a sudden, the Monte Carlo has fallen from that 99% that it was before all the way down to 62%. And then we do see that the median for that Monte Carlo fell from just over 2.5 million down to just under 500,000. So going down from 99% to 62% is a big jump, but this still isn't a completely doom and gloom scenario. But this definitely makes things a lot tighter. So if we come look at some of these key metrics again, we can see that in the withdrawal rate, still have a higher withdrawal rate, at least initially, but then the difference here is when the Social Security kicks in at half the amount that it was before, we're seeing an increased withdrawal rate year over year because they're having to take more and more of that portfolio to help support because they don't have as much of that foundational piece in Social Security. If we come over here and take a look at how their assets grow, this looks very similar to the previous look that we had when their Monte Carlo is 99%, but the projection of the assets has really fallen off, and that's because the investments don't get to hang around as much as they did before. They've got to eat away at that on a year-over-year basis. And when we come and take a look at their confidence, well, now we start to see that they have a much wider dispersion on between that 5 and 95% confidence interval than they did before. Now we're actually starting to see some of that bottom tail risk crash down here into this life expectancy line well before that age 90. The median line still stays fairly even, and then we do have that dip off for long-term care at the end. But this is really kind of what that probability signifies. How many of the scenarios that the Monte Carlo is running do they stay fine versus how many scenarios is there potential for them to run out of money? And then what is the possibility at the various ages? So this would not be ideal, but again, this isn't exactly a gloom situation, because if they just experience the average, well, that's essentially in the middle. And so as we see, the median line still gives them a chance to kind of make it. You would certainly like to see that Monte Carlo be as high as it can. And if you have a particular, minimum acceptable probability of success for yourself, then you certainly want to try to meet that. It's certainly not as strong of an outlook as it was before. Now you're starting to experience the increase in longevity risk and sequence of returns risk. And if you have all the wrong things happen at the wrong time, it is more possible now for them to run out because they have less baseline of income from Social Security. So now what we need to do is have the completely dire situation. Social Security, again, this is hypothetical, but let's say Social Security comes out and says, bad news, folks, we are completely insolvent. The benefit's gone. You're on your own. In reality, there's probably a lot more problems going on with the economy or just globally. If that happens, I really doubt you're going to have the same assumptions on the return of your portfolio. But all we're doing right now is really playing this hypothetical game. We want to see what happens if there is no Social Security and you have to make it on only what you can save and invest during your working years. So here we go back to Joe. And for Joe, we say, look, there is going to be no Social Security. Here we say to Jane, look, there is going to be no Social Security. And let's say they still want to try to stay retired at 65. Well, what do you think is going to happen now? This one seems a little bit more obvious than the previous, but let's take a look at their retirement outlook with no Social Security. And so all of a sudden we have this far lower probability of success at 19%. If we come and take a look at some of these key stats, let's look at withdrawal rate. Well, that escalates pretty quickly, and then we do see that, at least in this one, we do end up with an income shortfall. So if we come over here and take a look at how the assets progress, they kind of hang in there for a while, but then towards the end of life, they just fall off. Now, if we come and take a look at their confidence, this looks like the last review, but even worse, much wider dispersion. Now we have that median line actually crashing down here right around age 85, age 86. I mean, there are some scenarios where if the markets are just absolutely out of this world, they're going to be just fine. But is that something that they want to count on? Do they want to look at their probability of 19% over here and say, well, that's good enough. We're happy to do that. No, they're probably going to look back over at this and say, well, in average situations, we're on a path to run out early. And that is not something that we find tenable. And I know right now someone's out there saying, well, reverse mortgage, they have all of this equity in the home. Well, great. The home is not a $2 million home. We said before it's worth $500,000 and that home value will grow. But is a reverse mortgage going to provide enough initial credit? And then is that credit line going to grow quickly enough to keep up with the needs that they're going to have from the loss of Social Security? These loans can have high costs, and what if there is that black swan event where you can't keep up with the maintenance or some other requirement of the reverse mortgage and you end up getting foreclosed on? Again, not everybody has a multi-million-dollar home that's paid off in retirement that they can just draw from worry-free for the next 30 years. Downsizing a home or selling and finding a cheaper living situation, this is not exactly a joyful event for folks that are forced into it. Same would be for the reverse mortgage. So typically in planning, when you're helping somebody initially, you almost never include the primary home as an asset with the expectation of its use. It's almost always a last resort, and usually it's going to be done out of duress. So let's come back here and talk about, is there anything that's possible at this point? And realistically, the only thing that they could do is lower their expenses. So let's say instead of $5,000 per month, they want to go to $4,000. Let's say they are going to do their best to try to cut things like long-term care down in half. What does that do to their situation? Let's take a look. So here we see a 47% probability of success. Now, it's definitely a step in the right direction, but I don't know if this instills a ton of confidence in their plan to stay retired and just greatly or drastically reduce their lifestyle. So what about folks that aren't retired yet? What is it like for them? Well, let's take a look and see what would happen. We can actually just kind of stick with Joe and Jane here, but what we will do is we'll actually increase the amount of assets they have available to them. That would be kind of that first thing that somebody could do if they are genuinely fearful of this, try to build a larger nest egg. If Social Security is not there, if pensions aren't there, if there's not added income support to help on that baseline, well, the money has to come from somewhere, and it's going to have to come from what you're able to save and invest. So we'll still say that we're going to stick with age 65. We're still going to say that the goal is to retire and live off of the investments. But at least in this doomsday scenario, the only other difference that we're going to make is we're going to say there is no Social Security, but markets by and large would, hang in there and maybe do what they would have done anyways. So what would it actually take? Well, let's just give them $1 million more and see what happens. So instead of this $166,000 in that taxable, let's say they got 1.166. So now when we come back over here and we take a look at their elevated retirement situation, again, this is taking them from $1 million invested asset up to $2 million. Hey, all right, now we're starting to look pretty good again. This is back a lot more towards ideal. We have our Monte Carlo now showing us at that 91% probability of success. We see that our median line is now over 4.7 million. If we come over here and we take a look at some of the key metrics, see that withdrawal rate is actually a lot more sustainable now. If we take a look at how the portfolio grows, we see that we have portfolio growth again up until we see long-term care kick in. Come over here back to the confidence. And we have what again appears to be a more idealized outlook on their confidence intervals. Median line is growing over time. We don't have the the negative tail risk and crash down really until we get much closer out here to age 90 or life expectancy. And so this right here looks far better. And this is, again, assuming we don't have any of that Social Security. Now, if something were to happen, like if there was that black swan event and they had to then go access the home value, okay, it's still there. But the idea is that you don't want to be forced into that decision. This idea of aging gracefully, usually it means you don't have a ton of stress hanging over your head. And if, let's say, for several years in the later years of your life, you're dealing with the decision of, well, should I sell my home now or do something to tap into the equity value, not knowing exactly how much longer you're going to live, that's not exactly going to make you feel great about your golden years. And again, we'll take a look at that probability, 91%, median line looking really good. We didn't have to adjust any of the spending assumptions, long-term care assumptions, any of the added healthcare assumptions. We're able to basically have a better looking outcome, and not surprisingly, because in this example, we said they had more money in place of that Social Security. So what is ideal for you, or what is ideal for anyone? Well, it's subjective. Somebody might look at their probability of success and say, well, hey, a 50-50, that's a coin toss. I can live with that. I'm willing to adapt as hard as it takes. If I have to literally go from spending, $5,000 a month down to $2,000, I won't bat an eye. I'll be happy to do that. I don't want to work for an extra, 5 or 10 years just to build or double my net worth or my invested net worth from $1 to $2 million. Great, that works for them. Somebody else might say, well, I want to retire early. Maybe I am very concerned about Social Security going away. What exactly do I need to build? If I want to plan as if Social Security is not going to be there, well, what do I need to have to cover all of the contingencies? And that's really what planning is about. It's trying to understand what is possible. There is no perfect financial planning software. None of this is going to tell you the exact future. And what you choose to do with your assets down the line is completely up to you. Some people absolutely know they will never sell their home, or they grew up there, they raised a family there. They don't want that to be a part of the plan. They never want to be forced to sell. They'd rather cut spending all the way to the bone and literally live off of ramen every day for their life than ever conceive of having to sell the home. And others look at it like it's 4 walls and a roof. Let it go. I'll sell it. I'll rent somewhere cheap. Maybe I'll be an expat. I'll go live overseas, at $1,000 a month and live like a king on a beach. Whatever floats your boat. Planning is about helping you understand what are the decisions that you may have to make to do the things that you want to do. And if you don't know what those things are, planning is very difficult. Planning is all about trying to understand what is the pathway that you are on, what is the probability or chance that you're going to have to change what you're doing or how you're thinking or how you're living. So there is nothing that is set in stone, and this is something that everybody needs to look at, because what you want to do in retirement, when you want to retire, how you want to spend, how flexible you want to be, all of those options that you could possibly conceive of or consider, Everyone is going to look at those in a different way, and they're going to prioritize different things. But in a world where there is no Social Security or the benefit is cut down, well, the answer is pretty obvious. You need to save a lot more money if you don't want to be extraordinarily flexible on, working till 80 or cutting your expenses to the bone. What we saw really isn't that surprising. And the scope of this case study is not to debate the future of Social Security, but to look at a what if for those individuals that have this fear. So for anyone that is genuinely concerned that Social Security is going to go away or perhaps pay pennies on the dollar, then the formula for reducing your chances that your money doesn't run out isn't very shocking. You either have to work longer, save and invest even more, or reduce or change your spending assumptions in retirement. None of these changes may be desirable, but it doesn't change a sobering truth. If you aren't receiving Social Security, well, the money to pay for your retirement and lifestyle, it has to come from somewhere. And if you plan for the worst and the worst ends up not happening, imagine the lifestyle that you'd be able to have or the legacy that you'd be able to leave to family or to charity. So my encouragement to everybody would be to stay positive and do what you need to do to plan a successful retirement. Once more, I'm Curtis Crossland of Subtle Crossland Wealth Advisors, and if you want to see how we help folks build a more tax-focused and efficient retirement, be sure to check us out at subtlecrossland.com and subscribe for future videos.